intention of Natural Freedom League is to expand the understanding of natural law, which is based on objective morality, and to expose the illegitimacy of the belief in authority, and thus the inherent immorality of all government.
We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the
Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Natural Freedom League. We are at naturalfreedomleague.com. I am John Wydogen, here again with my producer and co-host extraordinaire, Chill Will Keller. Hello,
What's
Will.
up, my brother? How's it going, man?
It's going good. I got my Weed California shirt on representing the state of Jefferson.
Nice.
They're trying to burn down Jefferson right now. I think it's because that's where all the conservatives live. But all the resistance to this communism. But anyway, we have a wonderful guest with us today, Miss Dayna Martin. Hello, Dayna.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Our pleasure.
So Dayna is really a leader, if not the leader, in the unschooling movement. She's written a book about unschooling, and some of you may not know what that is, but we will get into it. Oh, there it is right there. Radical Unschooling is the name of the book. And she also promotes peaceful parenting, which is another part of what she does, which I really resonate with and find interesting. So we're going to dive right in, and we would just like you to tell us about your background and how you discovered and developed the philosophy of peaceful parenting and unschooling.
Okay, great, thank you. So I have 4 kids who have never been to school. We've always lived in a peaceful partnership-based paradigm. It wasn't something I planned to do, it just happened really organically. I have a son who's 13, Orion, a daughter Ivy, who's 16, a daughter Tiffany, who's 19, and a son Devin, who's 22. And they've always been parented this way. Now, when Devin was born, I gave birth to him, and it was a really intense, amazing experience. I gave birth to him naturally in a hospital with a midwife, and I never thought I could do it. It was everything inside me, everything in my culture had told me that I couldn't do it, that I wasn't capable of it, that I needed to be rescued, and I needed medical support and all of that. But something inside me told me to really dig deep and research, which I researched a lot. And I ended up having this amazing natural birth, which blew my mind. And I can remember thinking, holding him for the first time, that I had to tell other women about this, because there's no empowerment in our culture. It's all fear-based. It's all set up as such that when you give birth, you lose your own innate ability to trust yourself, because you think if your body didn't work and you needed to be rescued, it carries on for the rest of your parenting. You turn to experts to give you information of how to parent. And my experience was very different, and I wanted to empower the women. So I became a childbirth teacher. I became a doula and later became a midwife. I educated people about attachment parenting. And attachment parenting is kind of like the beginning of unschooling, because it's about trusting your child. And everybody around me told me to not hold my son too much. I can still remember, don't hold him too much. If he cries, make sure you put him down, because he'll manipulate you. And don't sleep close to him. He has to be in a separate room, and only feed him on a schedule. And that felt so wrong to me. So I let go of everything around me, and I tuned into my son. I held him when he wanted to be held. We co-slept safely. None of my kids ever slept in cribs. We always practiced where they wanted to be and respecting that. And so radical unschooling is an extension of that same trust. And I started supporting people with that on my journey. I wrote a book. I was encouraged to do so by someone who was like a grandfather to me. His name was John Taylor Gatto. We were very close, and he said, "You need to write a book, dear." And I did. I wrote a book. I was honored enough to have Christine Northrup promote it and endorse it, as well as John. And yeah, the rest is history. Oh no, there's more history. Wait. I did not expect to be an advocate for this, and I did not expect to be a face for this. I just found this purpose within me. And so it was, I think, 14 years ago, somebody posted in a Yahoo group, so this is before Facebook, and said, "Dr. Phil is looking for homeschoolers. Here's the link." And I'm like, oh, screw it. I'm just going to click on it and fill it out. Well, I wrote the most radical things, never thinking, I would get a phone call. I said, "We don't believe in punishing our kids. We don't live by rules. We live by principles. My kids, we don't do any schoolwork. We follow their interests," and forgot about it. And I told my son, Devin, I said, "When Dr. Phil calls, tell him I'll call him back." Well, a month later, they called. And so, "We want you for the show. We're going to fly a crew out and film you." And that was the beginning of my journey for over 10 years in the media. Since going on that show, I've done a lot of TV appearances, Nightline, Fox News, tons of talk shows. It's been an incredible wild ride, but something that I really noticed is in the beginning, the first show that I ever did was with Dr. Phil, and he was very much against it. How is this going to work if kids aren't forced? You have to do schoolwork. You have to do all of this. And I stood my ground and did the very best I could to promote this philosophy and articulate it in the best way. So it went from that over the course of 10 years later, to fast forward through a dozen shows, on the Jeff Probst Show. He's the guy that is like the host for Survivor. He had a talk show for a while. Really cool guy. He had my son Devin and I on. And he was really supportive. He said, "Wow, I can see the value in this. This is amazing. I wish I was unschooled. I think the world needs to hear about this." So I saw the evolution in consciousness over the course of a decade of being willing to put myself out there. I've written 2 other books. I've written a book about birth, and I've called Freeborn. And I've also written a book that came out last year called Raising Rebels. And they're all basically about the same philosophy. So I could go on, but I want to give you guys a chance to ask me more details. Thank you.
That's awesome, Dayna. Yeah. And so I've dove into Radical Unschooling, and it's a phenomenal book. And I'm a homeschooling dad of an 8-year-old daughter. So when I started researching homeschooling, unschooling popped up, and your name was like one of the first ones. So I was checking out your presentations and videos, and it's just, the philosophy resonated with me. It was more natural based, and it recognizes humans' power, right? I mean, that's the misconception, is that parents can't teach their children, right? It has to go through institutions. If you need an education, you have to go to public school or some type of institution like that. So it was phenomenal, your presentations, and it really hit home. And I like what you said about principles, because that's what it's all about, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so glad I could help. For me, this is more about children's rights than anything. For me personally, in my journey, that children, I feel, are so discriminated against, and the way that people are told to parent them is so much like dog training. You see the nanny shows on TV, and you hear all the advice given. It's completely focused on behavior and behavior modification, and nobody asks, why is the child asking this way? What are the needs and the behavior? So that really always struck me as something that was a huge missing link in that evolution, the evolution of consciousness that we're all in. And we need to care about kids and give them choice. And so this philosophy doesn't mean that you don't do anything schooly. It's more about giving a child the choice. So people have said to me, what if your child wanted to go to school? And I said, I totally support them. Obviously give them information about that, but I would support their choice. This isn't about keeping them in a bubble away from the real world. Schools do a very good job of that on their own. They keep kids in the brick building all day, every day for 12 years away from the real world. And I don't want to do that. So this is about giving them a really wide world to learn and grow from based on what they love doing and who they are. So children's rights are something people don't really think about, but I think about it all the time. And it's something that meant a lot to a lot of people that inspired me on my journey. So I'm glad that it inspired you.
Yeah, it inspired me enough that I made a part 2 presentation from a presentation I did called Conscious Parenting for Conscience Beings, part 2. And a lot of it, I used a lot of quotes from your book and your presentations and stuff. And it really hit home. And for me, you know, like you said, children's rights. And a lot of people do not think about this. And us coming from the anarchist philosophy based on morality and rights, this is where it starts, right? It starts in the home with your children, to break that cycle and to honor their free will as a being. So
Yeah.
yeah.
This is definitely not the path for the lazy parent, because rules and that top-down authoritarian paradigm is easy. Actually, it's with detrimental effects, but it's easy. This takes time to care about everybody's needs equally and to find out how to meet a child's needs. It takes patience, it takes love. Not everybody wants to do it. So, but the wonderful thing to it is, even though it takes time, the joy and the connection that you have with your kids. The average person is not experiencing this. They think parenting is hellish and hard, and there's so many negatives. My life with my kids is joyful. It always has been. We've had ups and downs, but I love being with them and they love being with me. And so I've always felt on some level like I was living this life that I wanted the world to know about, because parenting was never presented to me like that. So when you respect your kids, they're happy. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, in watching some of your clips from your media appearances, it's clear that people have a very visceral reaction to this idea, and they kind of attack you. And it is similar to when you bring up the idea of anarchy to somebody, which, you know, I understand, because really I didn't even understand the philosophy of anarchy until within the last 6 years or so, when I really got into Mark Passio's work. And what I was wondering is, what do you think it is about you that allows you to be so good at expressing this and kind of staying calm? And you know, what skill set did you come with into this to be able to be such a great representative for this philosophy?
It's so nice to say. Thank you. I think compassion for the people that are coming at me, because I probably felt the way they felt 30 years ago. You know, like there was a time where I wouldn't have believed it was possible. So I try to put myself in people's shoes that they don't understand fully. And I also know it's so sensationalized in the media that they're only getting a small bit of it. And if I could spend an hour or two with them, they wouldn't understand. So one of the biggest things, though, for me in staying calm when there's a camera on me, is I know that my energy and how I'm representing myself speaks louder than my words. And if I'm promoting a peaceful philosophy, if I'm not peaceful, it's completely, you know, it comes off not believable. But the good thing is I am pretty peaceful. I'm a peaceful, calm person just by nature. And my kids have taught me that. I wasn't, though, like always. Before kids, I wasn't. So they are the ones that have kind of taught me how to be mindful. And yeah, it's not easy, though. I would petrified every time before I get up there. Like, it's not like I'm Zen before I walk out on stage. Like, I've been crying in bathrooms before I get out there, but the second I go out there, I know I have to kind of bring it. But I feel like something else kind of takes over. It's not about me at all. I'm just a messenger. And so I kind of get out of my own head and say, this isn't about you, get over yourself. Whatever childhood issues you're dealing with right now, put them on the back burner. You know, get out there and do what your purpose is. So, and I know I'm so lucky to have had these opportunities too. Even if they're crazy shows, I know that the people that are ready to hear this are listening. And it's been, I've never regretted going on a show, no matter how much somebody attacked me.
That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like you really tap into the inherent natural state that humans have. And I do believe that this is the natural state of what you know, the parent-child relationship should be of equal, right? And I say it all the time. My daughter is one of my biggest teachers. I learned so much from her, and she shows me so much about myself. So it really is a a teacher student dynamic going back and forth, and you do a great job at tapping into that. So nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, in my journey personally, I, again, through being in the health freedom movement, coming to the understanding of the dangers of inoculations and, the pharmaceutical industry, I did, have my daughter in school. She was fully up to date on all of her, well checkups. And in around the 6th grade, she was going into the 7th grade, I did start homeschooling her. And I actually left my job, and it worked out at the time because I had my partner was going back to work, and our baby was, just about, 6 months old or something like that. So I was going to be a stay-at-home dad and homeschool my daughter. And but so for people like that, what would you say to someone who feels like, we'd love to do what you're doing, but we don't necessarily have the means, and we're in this position where, sometimes 2 parents have to work, especially, depending on where you're at in California, it's pretty crazy to try to survive. So, how have you maintained that? Not, you have to get into your like financial situation or whatever, but, clearly you were in a position where you could step into that role with your first child and then build from there. But if you're someone who has a child and you would like to do this, but you can't imagine surviving without, leaving your job and, losing some income, what advice would you give to someone who had those kind of questions?
For me personally, because I knew I would stay home for the first year of my child's life, I basically just extended that. And because we made it work out, I think when you have that priority and that trust that things have a way to work out. Now, it wasn't without a struggle. There was a time where my kids were really young and we were on food stamps and like all kinds of things that, I wouldn't use now, but back then we were struggling. But I just knew that I would never regret it. It's kind of a mindset. And so if it comes into your life where you really want to do this and you have a young child that hasn't even entered school age, don't even consider it and just put one foot in front of the other. Now, single parents live this life, all different people of all different backgrounds. In the beginning of my journey, it was mostly naturally minded, like moms. It was the home birthing moms, more naturally minded types. And now it is so vast. Over the last decade, especially the last year and a half, 2 years here, I do coaching calls with doctors, lawyers, parents that are really well off, all the way down to people who live in a trailer, like one single mom. So this life is attainable for anybody. And if anyone's really wanting to and they don't know how to, you guys can always contact me and I could connect you with other people that are doing this. I have a really big group on Facebook. If you don't like Facebook, Telegram, there's all different resources. I can connect you with people that can show you how they personally have done it. But yeah, I don't know if that's the best answer, but I just know it's possible. I think it's believing it's possible and finding ways to make money from your passion. That's a great time to have a home business. If you think that you can't do it, part of unschooling for me is that I want my kids to be free thinking entrepreneurs if that's what they want, and the likelihood that they will be and that they are is really big, because I've always modeled that I want to be home with them and I want a career where they can be with me. That's always been my top thing. So yeah, just knowing that they can too, that the adults watching that want to do this, you don't have to stay at an awful job to make ends meet. Sometimes you got to take risks, and when you do, based on what your passion is and purpose, it's amazing how the abundance will flow. So yeah,
that's a good answer. I for me, my career was in early childhood education. For over 20 years, I worked with 2-year-olds up to high school kids. And when I I basically was, part of the reason I did it, at first was just the joy of being around children. But secondly was when I had my own daughter, was to be able to have her with me. And then again, unfortunately, I became aware of the issues with the pharmaceutical industry. And I was basically, forced out because I would have to comply with all of these, mandates that were coming down. But I did want to ask a question about it kind of stems from my experience in early childhood education. I remember noticing I worked with school age kids, and our director would teach us as a staff these ideas about conflict resolution amongst the staff, right? So it would be, she was sort of teaching us like how to speak to each other, right? And it was like, when you do this, I feel this, right? And kind of like conflict resolution type stuff. And then I got sort of recruited to this preschool center, which was in like a little bit of a more affluent area. And they were like teaching this philosophy to the children. So instead of like, where it was more like our job as a teacher was to like be a mediator to help them solve their issues, right? We weren't supposed to like solve it for them. We were supposed to try to help them to work through it. But my thought was always, how do we change the children when we can't even communicate with each other? So I just wonder what your thoughts were on that, in terms of, obviously by teaching this to your children, you are changing them. But in a world where even the adults are unable to resolve issues, and a lot of times it's sort of like, it seems like a struggle there, like what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's like, can you help the children when you yourself haven't learned how to resolve these issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts at home. If I had to do a lot of work to learn, I wanted to be the best representative of a peaceful philosophy to my kids, so I had to truly live it, and the area in which I could, practice mindfulness in every way I could, read books on positive communication. But being kind isn't that hard. It's just something that a lot of people aren't. So being authentic in my communication with my kids is the most real way for them to learn how to be authentic and honest. So honesty is a big deal, being honest, being authentic. So I've seen like a lot of these kind of scripted things, and I think they are helpful in the situation that you're talking about. I don't ever have to do that at home. I just have to be kind and compassionate and understanding. And so my kids have their own scripts. They don't necessarily say, I feel this or I feel that. It's more, it just flows so naturally and organically for them. And my daughter, who's 16, might yell at my 19-year-old and say, "You really pissed me off." But in essence, she is communicating her feelings, and they do that all the time. And my younger one, might just say, "I'm really, upset about this or that." So being vulnerable with your kids, I think, is really important too. And that's part of the partnership-based paradigm. Is I'm not afraid to show my kids how I feel. They've seen me in every emotion possible. I don't hide things from them. And if I did, they're the first to say, "What's wrong, Mom? What's wrong?" I can tell if something's wrong. My mother, back when I was growing up, be like, nothing. Like, she wouldn't want to bother me with it or trouble me with it. And a more traditional parenting approach would be like, never show kids your weakness. Basically, they'll take advantage of you, they'll manipulate you. You can't show them that side of you. Just be the authority and hide things from them. I'm open with everything with my kids, and at whatever comfort level that they're at. Not personal relationship stuff that's between me and my partner, but everything else is always open for discussion. So I think that's important, just being real with kids in the classroom, being real with each other. Scripts are helpful, but really kindness is a lot easier, I think.
Excellent. Yeah, I think one of the top issues that parents need to consider if they want to go into homeschooling and then eventually unschooling One of the biggest blocks, in my opinion, and I would like your input on this as well, is the parental conditioning that comes involved. You know, I understand that parents are uncomfortable and scared taking their kids out of school, but you know, people have been conditioned a certain way. And do you have any advice for parents to take that first step? I think a lot of it is kind of looking in the mirror and analyzing our own programming and conditioning. Any pointers for that to take that first step?
Immersing yourself in a community, if you can, online or in person, of other people doing it. Because I think when you decide to do it, if you're alone, you don't have any support, it can be really scary. Anything new is scary. So definitely researching, learning about it, getting more comfortable with it. There's a process called deschooling on this path. And it's unbrainwashing yourself just from seeing things in schooly terms and schooly, you know, through schooly lenses. And what that means is we're so conditioned to see life broken down into subjects, for example, math, English, science, and we're doing these subjects and they're so important to do these subjects. Well, they're not. You know, we touch on all of those just through living life. You never have to pull those out and compartmentalize. You can just live life. And, you know, we're not doing that now. We're not having this interview saying this is social sciences or whatever it is. We're living. And so it's a matter of, one thing I do with my work with coaching people is I really help them with that process. So helping them talk about their fears. I've had 2 calls today, very similar. It's funny you mentioned that, where parents are afraid their children will be behind because, you know, a lot of it's family pressure. The cousins are the same age and they're doing X, Y, Z. My kids are doing this and I'm feeling like I'm going to fail them. That's a really common fear. And I think encouraging them and letting them know what is normal, what is natural, what's natural reading age, for example, versus forced reading. And letting them know that, just have that reassurance is like a huge weight off of them. So fear is so normal. Fear is normal with every aspect of life. When you get pregnant, you're fearful of giving birth. You know, fear helps motivate us. It's not always a bad thing. So that fear will help get people to find those answers and gain that support.
Yeah. Fear of the unknown, right? It's the best thing you could do is research into something and educate yourself. Yeah, I get those pressures from my family as well. It's, you know, my family thinks that she needs to be at a certain level. Oh, at this age, she should be doing this and that and this. It's like, come on, like, you know, it's just a way to quantify the kids and atomize them. And, you know, you can't do that with human beings. We're all different. You know, we learn differently and our interests are different as well. So the world is the schoolyard, right? It's like, you got to dive in.
Yeah, and they're not asking you what she is doing. Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I was saying, and they don't ask you like what she is doing instead, and nobody cares about that. You know, our kids are getting a perfectly individualized education based on who they are as individuals. You know, and humans learn in huge chunks of time, so it's not uncommon for a child to do nothing but play a video game, for example, that they're really into for weeks at a time. And to the outside person looking in might think that that's doing nothing, but they have the freedom to be able to really delve into it and to learn so much from it. My son Devin was really into building shelters outside. He was really into survivalism. He would wake up first thing in the morning and go out there all day, every day. And then, you know, spend all this time, and you should see them, they were mind-blowing. And he created his own looms, and he would get wool and weave them. Like, he was just so into all of that. He would make his own Viking clothes. I would actually, a family come over and be like, does he know his times tables? I'm like, do you see what this human being's doing and accomplishing right now? And you're worried about, so it's, nobody's saying, what are they doing? What are they enjoying? What are they loving? What is their purpose? What makes them happy? What makes your child happy? They just are, you know, concerned that they're behind. Well, I'd much rather my kids be behind the average in some areas, and because that way they're able to focus on whatever they're meant to do. And most of the time unschoolers, they might be behind in comparison to some areas, but they catch up super quickly if they need any of that information that's being learned in school for a career later in life. So out of all my kids, my daughter Ivy, who's 16, last year, about a year and a half ago, actually decided that she wanted to be a vet. She loves animals. She runs an animal rescue. And she had never done any formal schoolwork, nothing. nothing. And I said, well, let's find out what we have to do. I said, you do have to go to college for that. And she said, okay. She did an entire school career from grade 1 to 12 in every subject in 6 weeks. Got completely to the point where she's in college now by choice. She let me know, Mom, I found a great college that I want to start with online. She's going to have to go for 7 years by her free will, but it was the waste of time that kids are spending in school. The child, when their brain is ready and they have that internal motivation and it's actually in context and in a way they understand why they need to know it, they learn it like in a week's time versus years in a brick building, you know? So it's not like school or college is off the table. It's just a complete waste of time to force it with all this stuff kids aren't going to need. So she enjoyed it and I was blown away. Same thing with my son, Devin. He wanted a high school diploma just to see if he could get one, just to see if he knew what kids knew. Now, he was like the poster child for unschooling his whole life. He was on the Dr. Phil show when he was 6. He was on the Jeff Probst show when he was 14. Like, he's been in the media with me and he'd spoken all over the world about unschooling. When he was 17, he said, I want to just see if I can get a high school diploma. I'm curious. So we found this great school, distance school, and they came actually to his house with his then girlfriend, gave them the test. It was called Arch Academy, accredited school, like perfectly legit. And it took him 90 minutes. He did not prepare anything. And he passed the entire thing above average in every single subject, except for like English, which he was average in writing. He hates writing, handwriting. And yeah, he was above average. Isn't that mind blowing? Never having done a workbook, nothing, just from living life, you know, living a rich, full life with a parent who is facilitating whatever they're interested in with the resources. So that really proved a lot to me. It's actually, I think, the most liked Facebook post I've ever put on there. I think it got like 6,000 likes and shares all over the place. And I was like, so happy that it inspired people. So it's completely a waste of time to have your kids in school. And if you think that they're going to be behind, they might be now in comparison because they're doing what they want. If they want to do what my kids did when they're 15, 16, 17, they're going to breeze through the entire, everything they had to learn to get to wherever they want to be. So it's building that trust with parents, you know, telling them these stories, sharing with them that my kids aren't the only ones. There are hundreds of thousands of kids that are doing this now, hundreds of thousands, and all over the world. I've spoken in China and India. I mean, there's people in China totally underground unschooling. Yeah, so it's very passionate about it, as you can see.
You know, I think what you're doing is it's just fascinating. Like, because it's funny for me because I've always been very open-minded and I've always been curious and question things. But at the same time, like when I hear a presentation like yours, I mean, radical is a good word for it because it's so profound, the change that can make. Like when I was talking about, can you change the kids if you're still damaged yourself? But it is the most important thing we could do is to raise our kids the right way. And you know, even if that means working through your own shit while you're doing it, that's the best thing you can do. And so when you talk about it at the level you're talking about it, it's a lot of things that I knew instinctively. Like, for example, you're talking about the schooling stuff. I knew that when I was in school. I remember thinking, we always review what we did last year. We review it for like a quarter of the year or a third of the year. And then we start learning some new stuff. And then you learn history like 5 different times. Like you learn, you know, US history in elementary school, you learn it again in junior high, you learn it again in high school, then you learn it in college. It's like, why can't we just learn everything we learn at the junior college, you know, when we're in high school and then just be done with it? Why did we even have to learn it in kindergarten and, you know, or 4th grade or whatever, you know, grade it is? So even then I noticed this, you know, how repetitive it was and how, you know, so it's not surprising to me that your kids, you know, at 16 could sit down and, you know, go on Khan Academy or something like that and just whip through it, or work their way through it pretty quickly, because a lot of it is so basic, and it is about like building blocks. So, how long would it really take you to start at addition and subtraction and end up at algebra? Probably not that long, but they spread that out over, the first quarter of your life.
Right, because the intent of school, when you read the history of how it came to be in the late 1800s, compulsory schooling, it's like so fascinating. Do you know that 88% of parents did not want to send their kids to school? They did not want compulsory education. They were totally against it, and they were brought by gunpoint when schools first started in Boston, Massachusetts. So the history is, parents never wanted this. Nobody wanted this. It's just been so enmeshed now in our history and society that people, like, to survive, I think emotionally, they have to agree that it's good for them. And it keeps, it's like a glorified daycare. Now, I know not everybody has the opportunity to be able to be home with their kids, but there's co-ops, and if you meet other people doing it, and you could trade off facilitating and watching each other's kids. I know a lot of mothers that do this. Where there's a will, there's a way, to make it work. And it's not as hard as people think, because when people envision being home with their kids all the time, they're envisioning the traditional authoritarian paradigm. And I've had parents say to me, oh my gosh, I can't get them to do anything. All we do is fight, and he won't even do his homework. I can't imagine having to get him to do schoolwork at home. They're basing their belief on how hard this life will be on a whole different parenting dynamic of control and force and manipulation and fighting and yelling and punishments. When none of that's part of the equation, you're living in a peaceful dynamic, it flows. It just does. It's like on weekends, what do you do as a family? That's what you do every day. There's no force, there's no fighting. The siblings fight just like anybody else amongst each other at times, but not often. It's a much more peaceful way. It really is. So I don't think my kids deserve to be controlled and punished and told what they need to learn when they need to learn it. They naturally want to learn and grow as human beings, just like we do still. That's part of the reason you're curious about this philosophy. You wanted to learn about it. You had me on. This is how human beings naturally learn. We're unschooling right now. And the people listening to this are consensually, internally motivated to listen to it to learn. And the same thing is true of all humans, not just adults. Kids and parents equate learning with being miserable. And I can remember turning 17, 18 when I graduated, thinking, oh, I don't have to learn for a while, or on the weekends, I didn't want to learn. Little did I know that it wasn't learning that I hated. I hated forced learning. There's a huge difference. Forced learning is not learning. So it feels good to learn. It's like breathing. It's beautiful. And kids love to learn and grow. So Ivy came in my room this morning and she said, I'm going to take a class on Outschool. There's this awesome website, I don't know what it's called, but it's like kind of like Khan Academy, but it's this amazing experience with tons of different classes.
Skillshare.
And I said, is that toward what? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She takes the classes just for fun, not even toward any degree or anything. She's just like, I just want to learn about it. It's just like 2 weeks long. That blows my mind. It's so inspiring to me that I do the same thing. I'm like, I think I want to go take one of those. Like, we're meant to continue to learn and grow always. And we feel happy and fulfilled when we are. So, again, kids model for us how to be in this world when they're living in freedom. And so I want everyone to experience this.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And you said something that it nails it. When children are anyone, it doesn't have to be children, it's anyone, when they're internally motivated, they can accomplish anything. You can learn about anything. And that's how we naturally learn, right? When we're into something, we put in that extra effort and energy, and we retain the information and we can apply it to ourselves. So, being forced to learn, it doesn't sink in, and it's more conditioning and programming. And being in the freedom movement, giving your child, being that model and that example of what freedom is, right? Where you're not forcing them or adding friction to their free will. I mean, it should start in the household with the relationship with your children. So that's phenomenal. And I think another thing that you touched on as well is knowing the history of what the government institutional education system is, right? Or schooling system. Big difference between education and schooling. I think that's really important. So you mentioned the phenomenal John Taylor Gatto and his books. I think that's really important for parents to look into there. If you're not familiar with the history of what the indoctrination camps are, the public schooling, it's really important to dive into that and get a clear perception on what that is and what its purpose is, right? To mold the minds of children.
Yeah, and to train them for obedience, actually.
Absolutely.
It's a really big part of it. Obedience
sure.
training, again, like dog training. And if you're listening to this and you think this seems like totally radical, the terminology and stuff, I don't want that to turn you off, because, I know it can sound really intense, but the truth is pretty intense. The focus is on obedience and grades and performing. It's not on true learning. So it's like, you want to ask parents, what is your goal for your child? Is your goal for them to be obedient to society? And if you condition them to be like that, they're going to slip into a pretty unhappy job, because they're so conditioned for a mundane, boring life, taking orders. Is that really what you want? So many parents want their kids to be successful, but they rarely want them to be happy. It's not really a goal. It's more about that. They think if they're successful and have a good job and jump through all those hoops, then they'll be happy after. But it doesn't work that way. It's totally the opposite. Happiness now leads to success. When a child's happy, it leads to a successful life. It leads to opportunities. It leads them on a path where they never have to waste their whole childhoods doing what most kids do. So, I don't want people and, parents to be afraid that this isn't possible for them, because I never would have thought it would be possible for me. And the same is true for so many families. So it's not like we have anything secret that you don't. You're able to do this with the right support and understanding of the philosophy.
Yeah, I was thinking about how if parents didn't recognize how much of a factory/prison school is before, now after 2020, it's even getting worse. Today we went to go take my son to go to the park, and usually we go to the elementary school that I went to and worked at, and used to go when we were in high school. We used to go hang out there because it was like an open campus. You could go in through the streets from behind the school and walk in, and we just go sit on the swings and hang out, and it was just like where I grew up. And now, as of this summer, they've completely fenced the whole thing in. There's these huge black bars all around it. And my stepson's school is similar. During the pandemic, when they were out of school, they built all this, basically enclosures. And he said that they told him it was because of fear of shootings. And and I just and it was so sad to me today that we pulled up into the parking lot and we weren't even able to get onto the playground anymore. It's completely closed off. And so, yeah, I mean, I just think that one thing I was going to ask about that is I would imagine that your business may pick up, because, a lot of people who maybe would like to get out, or are not going to comply, they're going to start getting forced out, so I was wondering have you been having an uptick in people finding you about this?
Huge one. Yeah, I offered right after everything happened, I offered like a free homeschooling survival kit, basically for anyone that wants to learn how to live this life. And I got a lot of people connecting with me. I did a lot of free workshops just to support people, educate people. I decided I had so many people contact me that were so interested in advocating for this life. That was something I wasn't expecting. So I started a program where I train other people to become parenting coaches and advocates and speakers and leaders in this too. So that is something that's really picked up, is me supporting other people who want to do what I'm doing. Yeah, so that's been a ton. Oh my goodness, business has been, when I say business, I mean just connections. I get over a dozen messages a day at least, just through Facebook alone, never mind the other social media outlets. So people are waking up, they want alternatives, and they just don't want to do the traditional homeschooling route. So when they hear about this, I think it's really intriguing. They're like, oh, we don't have to force our kids to sit at the kitchen table all day, every day and do what schools do. And it's like, no, you never do. And people want to be with their kids. I think something really interesting happened when COVID, when all this happened, because parents, I think, were really scared to be home with their kids all day, every day. But I'll tell you, parents and kids reconnected, these bonds, so much healing happened between them. They were not expecting it to be as pleasurable, I think, and joyful as it was. I think they thought it would be a living hell, because that's what culture says. They can't wait. All the school commercials on TV, the parents are dancing and singing, and it's promoted as you can't wait for your kids to be away from you. But the reality happened, and that families got closer, which makes it really scary for the government when that happens. But so many parents are like, wait a minute, this can work. Like, I love being with my kids and they love being with me. And so how can we do this? So huge things are happening, and so much good has come out of this, as much as there has been bad from where I'm sitting. You know, really, I've seen so many parents and kids finally brought together. It took all of this to make it happen, but so many more people are free. I know there's a lot more bondage and burden and awful things happening too. So I'm not ignoring that. But it would be wrong of me to not share the amount of freedom that's come into people's lives as a result of this when it comes to people keeping their kids out of school. So I think that's incredible. I never imagined this happening. So
yeah.
It's a good,
big much love and respect to the parents that dove headfirst in this and did it, and gathered the courage to take that step, especially with the current atmosphere, what's going on. It's really deplorable, and the psychology of children in the years to come, it's going to be heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking now, but it's just going to be imaginable in the years to come. So that's kind of why we're doing this episode, and I'm a huge fan of your work. So to drop that seed and spark parents to check your work out, to look further into it, connect on your social medias, to get those resources, and then do it. So, and the government should be scared.
Yeah, they should be, because from what I'm seeing, things are changing really quick. And when parents take their kids out of school, the influence that the government has is so much less. This is what we need. This is what we need for this evolution, this revolution. So I'm really grateful that you guys had me on today. Thank you.
I wanted to share something with you before we go. So just funny how stuff, overlaps. I've been reading this book by Wilhelm Reich. I don't know if you know a lot of his work. It's called Ether, God, and Devil. And he gets into talking, he's questioning, like, why all the struggles with humanity? Like, why, like, what is the issue? Like, why have we constantly, suffered? And he gets into this idea of the armored versus the unarmored, right? So the unarmored is the natural living person, right? That you're born unarmored into the world. And the armor is the armor that you have to build to adjust to the society and to the culture. So I just wanted to read this passage because I thought it really fits with your work. The destructivity of the armored toward unarmored life can be observed in the attitude of the majority of educators toward infants. The newborn comes into the world without armoring. The living functions in it according to its own laws, without consideration for the demands of culture. Its first life expression is the activity of its organotically highly charged mouth. In our highly respected lying-in hospitals, the infants, according to an iron law, are not allowed to be at the mother's breast during the first 24 to 48 hours. It takes strong persuasion to influence a nurse or doctor to break this rigid rule. The infants suffer and cry. Culture has no ears for them. One asks a reason for this measure. There is no reasonable answer, or only one of those stiff answers as they come to us from the mouth of a mask. The infant is permitted to be with the mother only for a few minutes a day. Think, what a crime against the rules of hygiene. The newborn, which was just torn out from organotic contact with the warm uterus, lasting for 9 uninterrupted months, this infant, which was suddenly transferred from an environment with the temperature of 37 degrees into a temperature of 18 to 20 degrees, is not permitted to have contact with its own mother's body. It is against the rules of hospital administration, against culture and morality, a provocation of the Oedipus complex, a crime against propriety and custom, a life expression condemned by the highest of all sciences, medicine, as represented by Academy of Science and the honorable doctors and presidents of all universities in this universe, in which electrons and protons next to neutrons and positrons dance the St. Vitus's dance of atomic explosives. St. Vitus's dance, I guess, was a disease. I looked that up, okay? Here, exactly here, and nowhere else are the bases implanted in the newborn for war, and not at the congresses of the diplomats. The newborn reacts to the cold at first with anxiety, then with crying, and finally with contraction of its autonomic system, the first contraction of its life, if a dead uterus has not already damaged its organism. So I just thought that was really powerful.
Wow.
In that, what we do, and how we've built up this armor, and how that affects these children, and then, how that then plays out in society,
Wow, that was an incredible passage. I would absolutely love for you to send me that.
I
Send me the
will.
book or title or whatever. It's so good. Wow. And I do think it's designed that way. We are designed from birth to be detached from our parent. They design it that way. So it takes a lot of effort for somebody to, like it said in that passage, for the parent to be with their child. Things are changing, improving with baby steps, but wow, incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that, John.
Yeah. That's deep. That's deep. That's definitely powerful. Even parents to be, right? There's just a vast amount of knowledge that you can take in, even from that beginning, even through pregnancy and during birth, right? Like Dayna, you said you have a book. You're a midwife, and
Yes.
My daughter's mother and I were lucky to run into synchronistically a midwife, and she had a natural birth. It wasn't a home birth, but it was, no drugs or anything in a hospital, and she had total control. So that was like a good starting point for us. And it was just from there, that experience, I learned so much knowledge, and I'm glad we went that route. So, it does start at that beginning point.
Great. It makes a huge difference when you realize that birth is big business, and you need to be a good consumer. You need to do your research. You can't rely on them because much of it's motivated by not wanting to get sued, much of the choices, and ease, speed, and money above all else. So when you realize that, you take responsibility for your own birth, and in doing that, it's the first step towards freedom for your kids. And that bond is never broken. You're intuitively connected, and you're much more compassionate to your child than if somebody rips them apart, like in this passage, and doesn't let you connect. You become really numb to your instinct because everything inside you is screaming for that baby, and vice versa. And what happens if you numb that from the very beginning? It gets number and number and number to the point where you don't even know how to parent, and you turn to experts. So, wow, great conversation, guys. I could talk to you all night.
Thanks, Dayna.
Yeah, so let us know real quick where we can find your work and where people can look you up, contact you.
Sure. You can find my website, daynamartin.com. That's where kind of the hub of all of my programs. If you need coaching support, I do group coaching. I offer a lot of resources and a lot of different workshops and courses you can get there. A lot of videos on YouTube. If you look up the Sparkling Martins, that's our YouTube channel. There's over 250 videos there with a lot of different talks and just of my family in general. So I'm on all social media. You could find me. Just drop me a message. I'm happy to support you in whatever way you need support. So thank you guys. Thank you for the opportunity. This was awesome.
Yeah, and viewers, Dayna's also on the One Great Work Network, so you can go there and check out some of her work as well. So thanks again. I really appreciate you, Dayna. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Will, and thank you so much, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Dayna. We appreciate it. And thank you, Will.
Thanks, brother.
And always remember, put something good in the air and plant something good in the earth. Peace.
We be the natural freedom.